Good afternoon. We're excited to be back here with Tiffany Lesnik. For those who are joining in for the first time, we interviewed her last week. This is part 2 in our series that we are doing on Ask Lawyer Tiffany Lesnik. And we are doing this because November is Family Court Awareness Month. Before we get started and I kind of recap a little bit of what we covered last week, Tiffany, can you go ahead and introduce yourself? I know many people know who you are. As I mentioned last time, she was on the board of Call to Peace Ministries. Her husband, Richard, still serves on the board of Call to Peace Ministries, and they have been longtime partners with Call to Peace. So we are so glad that you're here. So please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a privilege and a blessing to be able to be here with everybody today. I'm Tiffany Lesnik. I am a family law attorney in Raleigh, North Carolina. I practice primarily in the areas of high conflict, divorce, particularly custody, and also domestic violence. I do a lot of child abuse and sex abuse cases as well.
Yes, and we are so grateful for you. We refer a lot of people to you. And unfortunately, she can only practice in Wake County, but she is getting going with a coaching business. So we'll be able to take more clients to coach them along soon. But today we want to go through some questions. And last week, if you watched in, you would hear some of the basic questions that we asked. So this kind of builds upon those, and it kind of goes a different direction. We'll be asking very basic questions too, but it's just a different direction. But last week she addressed what does lawyers consider domestic violence, domestic abuse, and coercive control. So it was just a really great interview. I highly recommend go back and rewatch it if you have more questions. And we are accepting questions today in the comments. So if you're jumping in and you're like, hey, I've got questions, drop them in the comments. If we get a chance, we'd be happy to have Tiffany answer them here. And let us know where you're watching from. It's fun to see all the places that we're reaching today. So tell Tiffany hello, and thank you too for being here. So Tiffany, let's get started with our first question. And that is, and I'm excited for this one, y'all. Could you provide a general explanation of the difference between no fault and fault divorce? What is the significance or importance of one over the other?
Yeah, you're just going to jump right in with the hard ones. You guys asked some difficult questions, that's for sure. And I'm going to start off by saying that family law, the laws governing family law is different across every single state. So while there are some federal laws that are incorporated into every single state has their own set of laws that govern domestic issues. Okay. So I'm a North Carolina attorney. And so the laws that we have here in North Carolina may not be the same as what you have in your state. So I just ask that you take that into consideration as, I answer some of these questions today. It's very important that the information I convey is not construed as legal advice. In your particular state, I would encourage you and urge you to seek an attorney in your particular state and get very specific legal advice as to where you live because of the differing laws. So I just wanted to kind of start there. But this is a good question to start there because no fault divorce and fault divorce vary state by state. And the information that you get, like I did like a preliminary Google search before we started today, and I got very inconsistent information. So I would not recommend doing just a Google search as it relates to no fault or fault divorce. But the significant difference between the two is that when you are filing for a fault-based divorce, you are alleging that someone has committed misconduct in some way. So whether that is adultery, abandonment, domestic abuse, something of that nature. And it usually doesn't require time restrictions in order to file for divorce. Whereas no fault divorce, which is what we have here in North Carolina, does not require that you plead any kind of fault on behalf of the other person. It just means that you want the divorce. It doesn't matter what the reasons are, and only one person has to consent to the divorce. So even if the other person absolutely doesn't want it, it's no fault. It will be granted as long as certain factors are met. There are time restrictions or time requirements in no fault divorce. So for example, in North Carolina, you have to be physically separated from one another for 12 months before your divorce can be granted or before you can file for divorce. So those are the big differences between the two. In fault divorce, you're going to be alleging some kind of fault, usually don't have time restrictions. And then no fault divorce, You don't have to allege any fault. Only one person has to file. And there are time restrictions. In some states, they can be pretty lengthy, like North Carolina, it takes 12 months.
Yes. Is there any advantages to filing fault versus no fault? Because I know a lot of times people, even if there's domestic violence, are encouraged to file no fault, at least in Wake County.
Well, so you can't really, and this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So certain states require you, when you go to file for divorce, you have to file everything at one time. So you think about divorce as a package deal, right? So there's custody, there's child support, there's spousal support, alimony, property distribution, and the divorce itself. So the divorce is actually what severs the marital relationship. Some states require you file everything all at one time in one big package. Okay. In those states, they're going to have a requirement that you can either do, it's either no fault divorce or it's fault-based divorce. Okay. So you may not have a choice depending on what state you live in. North Carolina segregates their claims, meaning you can file for custody and child support today, and you can wait and file for alimony and equitable distribution and absolute divorce a year from now. You don't have to file everything at one time. We divide up the claims. Now, we have no fault absolute divorce. So as far as severing the marital relationship, we are no fault. But with regard to alimony, you can plead marital misconduct. So we're kind of like a hybrid state where you can plead fault when it comes to alimony and post-separation support. But when it comes to the actual divorce itself, it is no fault. So it depends on the state that you live in, and it's a little more complicated than it's just fault or no fault.
Thank you.
Hopefully I didn't confuse
That
you.
really helps me because I was just like, wait, I don't know the answers to all these things. And it's just amazing to think about, like, every state is so different. I believe it's Alabama doesn't have alimony. So every state is very, very different as far as their rules and laws. So that was extremely helpful considering you're a Wake County based lawyer. So thank you so much for explaining all that.
And what I will say is I think it's very important if there is a history of domestic abuse, if there's a history of sexual abuse, if there's something that's going on, I do think you should plead it if you have the ability to do that. Because I think it's very hard to come into court after you've put something in writing and then claim that your spouse is unsafe, or that he's committed indignities or had an affair, but you didn't put it in writing to begin with. So I think if you're going to hold firm and you're going to argue these things in court later, hoping to get additional alimony or to get additional custodial time or something like that, I think it's important to be firm right from the beginning and be willing to put that in writing on your complaint.
Yes, thank you. That was really helpful. And then how can someone best prepare for a court hearing to obtain this person asked permanent protective order or domestic violence protective order, as it's known in North Carolina? Different states call them different things. So
yes. And Lauren, I actually sent a handout. I don't know if we're able to either attach the handout during this presentation or if that's something that we can post online after the presentation is over.
Afterwards, I can't get it on here during this, but afterwards I can.
Okay, so I have a handout that I give to all my clients that's basically the best evidence to gather in cases where you have domestic violence. And whether this is for a domestic violence protective order that you're hoping to last long term, or it's a custody case involving domestic violence, the evidence is pretty similar. I think some of the best evidence is if you have audios or videos of the batterer in their true form, yelling, screaming, cussing, potentially striking you or coming at you. That is absolutely the best form of evidence if you have that. Text messages, emails, anything in writing, especially where he's really badgering you. He's using the language, insulting you, demeaning you, calling you names, those kind of things. When you're documenting evidence, definitely, document evidence. Make sure that you have the date. If you take a screenshot or if you print something out, make sure there's a date that's on those text messages or those emails, because you may not be able to get those documents into evidence if there's not a date on them. So just pointing that out as a tip. take pictures of things. So if he punches a hole through the wall, or he damages property, or he breaks something, take a picture of the broken plate or the hole in the wall, or whatever the damage is that he's done, and then timestamp it so that you have that as well. Another good thing to take photos of is your phone. If he's blowing up your phone and he's calling you, at 4:20 and 4:21, 4:22, 4:23, 4:24, and you've got 35 phone calls from him, take a screenshot that shows, like, he's called me 35 times in the last 5 minutes. That is excellent evidence. You don't need your phone records for that. You can just take a screenshot of that. Phone records are also really good, to show, like, how many times he's texting you, how many times he's calling, if he's calling you in the middle of the night, just, kind of the erratic behavior. Witnesses, know who your good witnesses are. Family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, teachers, whomever that might be. Talk to people who can come in and talk about what a reasonable person you are, and what kind of behavior they've seen of the perpetrator. Witnesses are a form of evidence, and your testimony is a form of evidence. And we talked about that last session, last week. Knowing how to tell your story is very, very important, and being able to convey what you've lived through in a really meaningful way, because the judge doesn't know what you've lived through, and you've got to be able to tell, to express with a lot of detail what you've experienced and what your children have experienced.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you so much. That's nice to know you don't have to have the whole phone records. You can just do screenshots, and that is sufficient. Is that sufficient too when you're looking at texts maybe that have been sent? Can I just do screenshots, or do you have to print it out type thing? Yes. Where you print out a log, so you can do screenshots?
You can do screenshots. Like I said, though, just make sure that you have the date on the screenshot. And what I would also recommend is you don't cut anything off. So if he's in the middle of a paragraph, make sure that you screenshot the next page that continues that paragraph, because you might get an objection if it's incomplete.
Thank you. That is really helpful for our followers, I'm sure. So thank you. What is the most, and I'm really, really excited for this one too, because this is just, we're getting now into talking about children and talking to them and those impacts. And so this is just such a sensitive subject. And I hear this from so many different perspectives, from counselors, but there's legal ramifications. And I'm excited to hear about this from Tiffany as well. So what is an effective way to discuss the harmful effects of coercive control and abuse on children with a lawyer or in the court?
Yes. And we talked about this a little bit last time. So I don't recommend using the term coercive control either in court or with an attorney, unless your attorney is very abuse savvy. I think coercive control is a term that's used in circles among domestic violence experts, primarily, therapeutic groups and groups like Called to Peace Ministries, right, who specialize in this area. But attorneys are not as well versed in areas of abuse and coercive control. So I would encourage you just to stick to the terms abuse, like abusive behavior. Your lawyer is probably going to understand that more. And the judges are going to understand that more. It's kind of like, if you have a doctor on the stand or you have a therapist on the stand and they're using really therapeutic or really medical terms, and everybody's just sitting there like, what are they talking about? It's the same kind of thing. Know what the harmful effects are to your children and be able to describe those effects to your attorney or the court, like similar to you being able to describe what you experience, like the terror that you experience during specific events. Like, be able to describe, are your children, are they losing sleep? Are they crying more frequently? Are they having nightmares? Are they starting to wet their pants? Are they having stomach aches, refusing to go to school, missing school? What are the behaviors that you are witnessing in your own children as a result of your ex's or the perpetrator's behavior? I think that is very meaningful to a judge, right? Because their job, especially in custody cases, is to do what's in the best interest of the children. And sometimes we get so focused on the other person that we forget about, well, how is this affecting the children? And so paying very close attention to your children. Are there records that can demonstrate the impact on the children? Do the medical records, like their pediatric records, show that they're losing weight or they're having trouble using the bathroom, or there are other medical issues that are going on, a lot of school, or their grades are going down. They're having to go to the guidance counselor more often. What type of physical documents are you able to request that will show changes in your children, and get those for your attorney, or ask your attorney to subpoena them for you. If your children have a therapist, talk to their therapist, potentially see if they'll be a witness, or get those therapeutic records as well. I think those can all be very helpful.
Thank you. And then I'm going to kind of skip around here because I want to keep talking about children. And you kind of, well, we'll go back to this one a little bit and wrap it up. But anyway, sorry. Okay, we're going to go here. What factors are taken seriously in court when it comes to speaking negatively about the other parent in front of the children?
So, this is a hard one. This is a really hard one because, unfortunately, narcissists have no problems telling blatant lies in court, and a lot of times they come across as very believable. I think because they can be so sociopathic that they either have absolutely no problem with lying, or they absolutely believe their own lies, because they're just they're just not rational. And so a lot of times it seems like they can get away with it. I think it's important to be able to counterbalance the narcissist lies with your own witnesses. Bring people in who can speak to who you are as a person, your character, your ability to exercise good judgment and insight in your parenting. Also, the fact that you don't do anything to demean or disparage or criticize him in front of your children or in front of other people. They can really kind of prop you up if you have third parties there that can talk about who you are, or talk about, hey, we go to the soccer games with mom, and the kids, and dad's there and she's always kind and considerate to him. So that they can help counteract some of that information. Also, how you communicate with him is very important. So in the text messages, in the emails to him, are you being kind and considerate, or are you tearing him down? Saying, I see you didn't pay your child support again this month. You continue to be a deadbeat dad, just as always. If you're talking like that, you're disparaging him to him directly, then that's going to hurt you in court, because it looks more likely that you would do that in other settings as well. So always, be polite, knowing that those communications could come into court later on and help you versus helping him. The other tip that I'll give, and I don't mean to run long on this one, but social media. So this one really hurts women more than anything. If you're posting on social media about him, about domestic abuse, he is going to pull that off Facebook or wherever else it is, and they are going to use that against you. So just be really mindful if you're in the middle of custody litigation or any kind of litigation, what you're posting on social media, because they're likely to use that against you. And I don't know what it is with the court, but somehow they think if you have a 2-year-old who can't even read yet and isn't on social media, that whatever you're posting on social media, has this major implication for how you talk about him in your regular family life or home life. So just be real careful with social media. And I do see, Lauren, that there is a question on the chat. And the question, it comes from Lady, I think, is it Champion or Campion? Can they prove if screenshots have been doctored? I've been told that screenshots are useless for that reason. I haven't had that issue come up yet. I do recognize that is becoming more and more of an issue, especially with artificial intelligence now that can create, almost anything, including photographs. So we have to be really careful with that. I think it's pretty easy to tell if screenshots have been doctored. What I would recommend there is, there are a couple applications that you can download. Well, there's several applications that you can download for iPhones. It's called iMazing. And for Androids, it's called Cool Muster. So it's COOLMUSTER, which will actually download all your text messages in one file from your phone. So you could have your screenshots there and also have all your text messages as one file to back up that, hey, these are legitimate. Like I have the full file. If you have any question about whether his text messages are authentic, you could have your full file of all the text messages. And then on an impeachment, you could have your attorney go up with the full file of the text messages and say, hey, these are the text messages you guys sent on the 15th. This isn't actually what you said, is it? So that would really help you in preparation for your case. If you think he's going to fake or fabricate evidence, I'd have the full, gamut of text messages or emails that you guys had together to be able to debunk whatever he's presenting. Sorry, that went long. Preparedness is key. Being prepared is very important to being successful.
Ooh, I love that. Preparedness is key. Yes, keep that in mind of everything else. And I love what you said about that app. Could you tell me that app again? I'm going to put that app in.
Sure. So for iPhone, it's called iMazing. So it's like amazing, but it's an I instead of an A. You're welcome. And for the Android phones, it's Cool, COOL.
Oh, 1 second. I got to write Android. Okay. COOL. Okay.
MUSTER. Cool Muster. And there might be a small fee, like a small download fee for both, but it's nominal. It's like, $4 or something.
Perfect. I know some people are going to be wondering how to spell some of those, so I'll put that in there. It's great.
You got it right.
All right, awesome. And then my next question for you is, this one is really good. How can you communicate with your children and answer their questions honestly in a way that won't negatively impact you in court?
Yeah, wow, that's a hard one too. And that really going to depend on the age of your children too. I sent you, Lauren, I sent you another handout. It's not exactly the same, but it's how to manage parental alienation with your children. Mm-hmm. And they're very, very similar, right? Because children who are being alienated by one parent are going to come and they're going to talk to you about adult issues or things that the other parent has said. They will talk to you about litigation or court-based issues that they shouldn't know about. So it's kind of the same thing. What I usually say is to allow your children to talk and listen, to what they have to say, but don't interrogate. Don't question, don't initiate any kind of questioning of them. I like to just be patient with them and don't disparage or talk badly about the other parent. Don't say things like, well, your father is lying, or that's not true. That kind of thing, but just listen. And then, don't really make a lot of comments, don't have judgments, don't have like major emotional reactions or breakdowns with them. It's okay to respond with empathy and be like, wow, that must have been really hard for you to hear. Or, wow, how do you feel about that? A lot of times, especially the older children, I will challenge them. So if they say, well, dad says that you did this or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, oh, wow. Well, when have you ever seen me do that? Or when is the last time you saw, mommy do that? And then they really start thinking about it. And they're like, well, I don't remember the last time I saw you do that or whatever. But then it gets them thinking. And then after they leave the room, they're still thinking about that. And then it starts challenging some of the negative talk that they're hearing. But then as far as court is concerned, I just tell them that, they don't need to worry about those issues, that they're a kid. They need to worry about kid stuff, that mom and dad have got it handled, that they're loved, they're protected, and that, everything is going to be okay. And then just let mom and dad handle that. And if they just keep pressing it, you just keep repeating it and saying they don't need to worry about it, right? Mom and dad are handling it. We're going to work it out. They don't need to worry about it. They just need to be a kid.
Thank you. That was really helpful. And then I kind of want to jump back here to the last two questions we're going to close out on. It kind of wraps up a lot of what you've been talking about. The question is, let's see, what is an effect? Wait, sorry. What types of evidence would be helpful to gather regarding coercive control? And I know we've discussed a DVPO and other stuff. So is there anything else that is really effective in gathering evidence?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we talked about before for the domestic violence protective order, right? Anything written, audios, videos, photos, all of those things are going to be the same. Um, Let me see. I have my list here. A police report. So if you've called, law enforcement at all, you can contact your local police department and get do a public request of records. And so they'll send you like a list of any time they've ever been called to your house. It may not have a lot of narrative, but it'll have like the dates and who called and when they responded. That can be very helpful. A lot of court records are now available publicly online. A lot of courts are moving to like e-filing. So do a search for your, ex or your spouse and see what pulls up. See what kind of criminal records they might have that they haven't told you about. See what kind of civil actions might be out there against them. They might have other protective orders that people have filed against them. And there's some of them, these guys are living secret lives. So those might be really helpful too. Make sure you also, I had mentioned taking pictures of damage. Make sure you take photos of damage of yourself too. Like if he harms you in some ways, put bruises on your body, make sure you're taking pictures of those injuries. And not just the day of, but like days after, because sometimes the bruising is much worse a day or two later. If you're going to urgent care or the ER, or you're going to your doctor or therapist or anything like that as a result of his behavior, if you don't want to disclose your medical records, have a copy of the invoice, like that shows that you paid on a particular date for a service to show that you're seeking out therapeutic or medical services as a result of his behavior. Those are also very good. And like I mentioned with the social media, be careful what you're posting, but also be checking out what he's posting. So, figure out what he's doing online and maybe download some of those posts. Again, keep the date, try to capture the date that he's posting those things. Proof of alcohol, substance abuse. So if he's using any kind of drugs, he's using a lot of alcohol, take photos of like the recycling bin or the trash can where there's a lot of empty bottles, or his liquor cabinet. It's okay to like go through his drawers when he's not home. Take pictures of any paraphernalia you might find. If he's got receipts to the ABC store or anything, any kind of evidence that suggests that he's using, because we know that substance use escalates violence, right? So that increases lethality to women and children whenever perpetrators are using some kind of substance. So that impairs or changes their mental facilities. So that's something else to be thinking of. And then evidence of financial control. You can certainly be documenting that. And I encourage you to do that anyway, even outside of custody cases, because you want to be able to show that he has certain retirement accounts, bank accounts, any other type of financial accounts, because you're probably going to need to prosecute a child support or spousal support alimony action later on, so that you can get the financial resources that you need going forward to protect you and your children.
Okay, thank you. That was extremely helpful. I'm like, wow, I'm learning a lot myself. So thank you so much. And then also, yeah, I kind of have a question too about that as well. Can they gather false evidence about you? I know this is kind of a random question. I know, like, say, for example, you hosted a party. I'm not saying I did this, y'all, but say you hosted a party and you had alcohol or wine at the party, and there's empty bottles in your garbage can now, but you hosted a party. So is there a way, so I'm thinking on that, he could be like, well, yeah, there's wine there. I had a party and there's only one evidence. Is there a way to document this as a pattern of behavior of those type of things? So I don't know. There's just kind of a thought on both sides of that could go that way.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely he could try to do that. And again, it comes back to being able to tell your story. And we talked about, not being overly emotional in court too, like being able to present your case in a way that the judge is going to find believable. So for him to say, oh, well, look at her recycling bin. And you can say, yeah, you know what? I did. I had a Friendsgiving event one time and we did have alcohol, but that's not something I regularly engage in. But for him, that's not the situation. Like he drinks, a bottle of bourbon every 2 days, and he has ever for the last 3 years or something like that. And if you can have more than just one set of pictures, that's helpful. But to be able to state with specificity how your behavior differs from him, I think is important. The judge is sizing you both up all the time, right? They're watching your facial expressions, your nonverbal behaviors, how you talk, how you present yourself, and they're judging who is more credible. So again, the telling your story is just very, very important in how you present. And that's why a lot of times narcissists will do better in court, because the victims will come in and they're very emotional. And they can't, they're not good at putting their words together, because they're kind of like a deer in the headlights. They freeze up when they get there because they're so overwhelmed emotionally. So that it's really important to work with someone beforehand to be able to speak with some authority and speak clearly, so that you come across as a credible witness. And I did see we had another question.
Yes. Right there. Do you want to read it off, or do you want me to read it off?
Sure. Purpose Divine asks, would the results of continuously negative comments made to the child about another parent be considered child abuse? It can be. Yes. So you have to be really careful with that. It can be on a couple different realms. One, it could be by Child Protective Services. So they could label it as emotional abuse or neglect and deem you the unsafe parent, or the other parent. It tends to work against mothers more than it does fathers. Even mothers who talk to their children about what domestic abuse is, your father shouldn't have hit you, or your father shouldn't have done this. This is inappropriate behavior. Sometimes we run the risk that Child Protective Services is like, oh, you spoke negatively about him. You're the unsafe parent. I would say in those cases, it's more important to teach your child how to be safe, right? That it's not okay for someone to hit them. It's not okay for someone to place their hands on them in an inappropriate way, so that they can protect themselves in the future, than it is to worry about what Child Protective Services is going to say. What I would recommend is never, ever, ever speak to your children about the abusive behaviors in front of Child Protective Services. So if they're in your home and they're interviewing your child, that's not the time to have a discussion with your child. So just a tip. But if the court finds that you're excessively talking about abuse to your child, or again, posting on social media, your world revolves around domestic abuse, and your child is directly being influenced by that, then that is a risk. So you have to think about, how am I insulating my child from these discussions? How am I insulating my child from the secondary effects of abuse? And what I mean by that is, if you are emotionally distraught at the domestic violence in your home, or that was in your home, and so you're experiencing a lot of trauma and anxiety and pain and distress as a result of that, it has an impact on your children, because they see it, right? So they see mom is crying a lot. They see mom is startled a lot. They see mom is talking about this a lot. They see mom, on the phone with her friends, or mom is distracted. Mom doesn't have as much time for me and my needs, because mom is so worked up and invested in domestic abuse issues all the time. And so that does have a direct impact on the children. And so it's very important that we get in with a support group or therapy to help address some of our needs, like our the trauma that we're going through, because we are actually transferring a lot of that trauma onto our kids, and it does have a very negative impact on them.
Yes, it does. And I think we need to give ourselves some grace when we see those things, and just say, hey, I know we've all been there, where our children have seen us cry a lot and process, because it's hard. And it's hard to hear those things, but it's like, and know that, okay, yes, my daughter's maybe seeing me struggle for a few months here, but know that I am also working extremely hard on my healing, so I can get up and eventually be a fully focused and present mother that I need to be. So we know it's hard as you walk through it, so give yourself a little grace, but don't stay there. Get
Yes.
fighting, move forward, and work through it, because you can several years later look back and be like, oh, wow, yeah, that was a season of my life. I cried a lot. It was really hard. Yes, I talked to my friends a lot and I cried, but I'm very different. And your children will see it turns out very differently and are at peace and happy when mommy is happy. That is so important.
And I didn't mean to say that to like beat up on it.
Oh,
Any of the ladies.
Yes, I was just
I feel like horrible about it. I see the amazing transformation in my own clients, right? When they first come to me, and then we get to the end of a case, many months down the road. I mean, it's amazing, right? How much growth there is and empowerment there is when you're going through this process. But yes, I absolutely agree. Like you can't stay there. Right. So you've got to be continuously growing, but involving the kids, they've got to be children, right? They got to be focusing on like Blue's Clues or whatever else is on TV, and playing outside with their friends, and not worrying about, oh my gosh, my mom is so upset, or my dad is so upset, and I need to do something to pacify them. And that just creates so much anxiety in them. And so just be mindful of that, right? That we want to protect our kids from the abuser, but we just want to protect our kids in general, because we love our kids, and we want them to be happy, healthy, little growing beings. And I know you all have the best, interest, and you want the best for your kids. Absolutely. That's why you're here.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And our final question is, and I think this is really good, is there an effective method to organize evidence for the lawyer? Are there any recommendations for resources that can make this process more helpful?
Well, OFW, absolutely love OFW. Our Family Wizard is a communication tool. It also, so you do all your like emailing and all that through OFW, and you also can do calendar, so posting your appointments. You can do financial transactions, so child support receipts and paying child support and all that through OFW as well. I like that so much better than any of the other apps that are out there, communication apps. So the nice thing about OFW is if you guys are talking about, let's say, soccer practice, as an attorney, I can log into your OFW, do a search for soccer practice, and only pull up the communications that deal with soccer practice. And I can print those out for the court as evidence. If you have one of the other like Talking Parents or App Close or something like that, I have to print out the entire chain of communications that you guys have had about soccer practice and teacher conferences and this, that, and the other. And it's just so much more confusing. So OFW, absolutely. Arranging your evidence for your attorney by topic or point. So let's say you want the judge to know that the abuser has interfered with your child's therapy. So we're going to have a whole section of our trial devoted to therapy. Then organize your evidence, like have a folder or a binder or something that you call therapy. And then all the evidence related to that is in that section. And then maybe there's another section that's deals with medical. So all the ways he's interfered with your child's medical care. So then arrange all your evidence according to like medical and so on and so forth. Anything that you really want to focus on in court, arrange your evidence or organize your evidence in that way so that it makes it really easy for the attorney just to pick it up and say, okay, this is what we're doing. Another way to organize it is chronologically. So don't just dump all your stuff on your attorney and you've got 3 years of evidence and now I've got to like sort, put it in order and try to figure it all out, because that takes a lot of time and a lot of money for you to have your attorney do that. So those are some of my recommendations.
That was really helpful. Thank you. I have learned so much today. I appreciate that so much. And then I see we have one more question. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. Do you want to go read that off, or you?
Sure. Purpose Divine ask again, would you recommend family therapy, and what should you do if they are unwilling to participate? So it depends. There are cases, so it depends. Family therapy and reunification therapy, let me clarify, are two different things. So I'm usually not a proponent of reunification therapy, as I believe it has a tendency to re-traumatize children. It depends on the reunification therapist. I'm not an absolute no in all circumstance, but you need to know who the reunification therapist is. Family therapy, if it's not forcing or pushing reunification with the batterer, and all they're doing is helping the child become more comfortable, reintroducing them to the abusive parent, I think it can be helpful, right? I think rather than having a child who's not seen a parent for 6 months or a year, now suddenly they're spending overnights with the perpetrator, I think it's really hard for them. So I think having that neutral third party as a bridge can be very helpful. So I think in certain circumstances, family therapy, yes, can be helpful. I think other times just be careful with reunification therapy. As far as family therapy between mom, dad, and the child, I don't think I would recommend that in abuse situations. I think that's just going to give the perpetrator an opportunity to abuse and manipulate, all three of you all over again. So I don't think I'd recommend that.
Okay, thank you. All of this was so helpful. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for your time today and answering all these questions. And like we said, the beginning, part 1 was last week. I'll drop a link to that. You can find it on both our Facebook page and our YouTube page. Under the live section is where all of our lives are stored. So we appreciate you interviewing with us 2 weeks in a row. So I hope this has really helped a lot of people and you've found hope through this. And I have learned so much myself. So I hope that y'all have as well and just feel more empowered and equipped to be able to serve other women that are impacted by abuse. So thank you once again. Tiffany, is there anything you want to close out with or?
Yeah, actually there is. So I've had some people contact me this past week, and I'm really sorry I haven't been able to get back with you. I'm in the middle of major trials right now, but some of the inquiries were about basically civil damages. So what do you do if you've been in domestic violence relationship and you've had like financial damages as a result of your abusive relationship? And that is not something that I do. So I'm involved in the domestic realm exclusively, but there are attorneys that do practice civil damages or civil litigation in domestic abuse cases. The one that does that primarily in my area, so North Carolina area, her name is Lido Copley. And I don't know how to, let me see if I can type this. I don't think I can type it out to the entire group.
I can't spell it.
Okay, it's LETO COPELEY. So I would encourage anyone who's looking to file for civil damages to reach out to her, or just do a general search for like civil damages, civil litigator in your area if that's something that you're looking to do.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. I hope anybody sees that comment that's been messaging you. So thank you so much for letting us know. And thank you again for all that you do for Call to Peace. We are so grateful for both you and your husband. Y'all are such huge ministry partners and supporters of us. And we're grateful for you being here today too as well.
Thank you for everything that Call to Peace does for all these beautiful ladies and their children. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. All y'all have a wonderful day. And you can find Tiffany. I'll link her Facebook page. You can contact her that way or search her on the web. I'll put a web page on so you can connect with her. So y'all feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thanks. See you later.